Attention is a form of nutrition. We are in an attention economy. Everything is stealing our attention. I suddenly had a lot less to work with. And for me, that's where innovation lies. I kind of feel like a bit of a personal trainer for organizations. Nature has been successfully evolving for 4.2 billion years. Like, there's some really incredible knowledge in there. I'm not under the illusion that everything's going to be easy and perfect as these new systems emerge. We've got to get small and connected again. If your street floods, do you know your neighbor? Do you know how to care for each other?
Where do you see it all going?
So, I think there's this misconception that you have to
Welcome to The Unfolding. I'm Olivier and I'm really grateful you're choosing to spend some time with me. My intention is to explore topics about connection, meaning, and staying human in this digital age. If what you hear feels nourishing, you're welcome to subscribe, like, or follow. It's a simple way of supporting my work and helping it reach others. Thank you. Khandiz, you grew up in South Africa.
I did.
How was that?
It was incredible when I reflect back on it now. I think when you're growing up, you don't really know what else is out there. But when I look back at what life was like growing up in Cape Town, was pretty extraordinary in terms of access to nature, the lifestyle, the culture, but it also comes with a lot of weight. I think obviously coming from a country that was very complicit in apartheid and things that I fundamentally disagree with, and benefiting from just being born a white woman carries weight with it. I won't say guilt because it's not something that I can take on, but a deep awareness of that. When I left South Africa in the mid-2010s, I really noticed how hard I had become as a woman, because you kind of have to. And also how you constantly on because of crime, and you just have this like constant presence of being aware of things.
You say you had to become hard as a woman. Why?
I don't know that it was something intentional. Like, South Africa has one of the highest rates of femicide in the world, if not the highest rate. I obviously grew up on film sets as well, where it's a very masculine place. And I just, again, since leaving and finding my own voice and finding my own feet and finding my own opinion since being outside of South Africa, I just recognized a softening in myself where I'm not also using like misogynistic language or thinking in that way, which is so ingrained. I remember being on a film set, and it was so normalized to have sexual advances or inappropriate language. And that's not just in South Africa. I think that's also the nature of that industry. But how I responded is very different to how I would respond now.
What would you respond then, and how would you respond now?
I would probably give as good as I got. In fact, I did give as good as I got. And now I would just call them out on their behavior. Without sort of trying to make somebody feel bad, but making them aware of what impact their action has, regardless of the intent of it.
How come you said you grew up on movie sets?
My mum worked actually in advertising, but on TV commercials. And because the industry is much smaller in South Africa, the people who work on TV commercials and film sets are pretty much the same people. So from the age of about 9, I would go onto set with my mum because she was a single parent and there wasn't always like daycare. So I remember going to this big famous landmark called the Castle in Cape Town, and they were filming this epic advertising production, and she didn't have someone to care for me through the night, and so I slept in the fireplace of this castle, and it was wonderful. That's not like a negative memory at all, but I just grew up always going everywhere with my mum, even to work when it was appropriate. And then of course I got into the industry myself at a very young age. My mum, she worked in art department, and I just remember her and her department always complaining about the makeup artists. She was like, all they do is sit down and they get paid so well. And I just thought, well, all you do is actually shop for somebody else's vision. You're really just pushing a trolley. I kind of want to do something in art. So logically, if the makeup artist gets to sit down the most and gets paid pretty well, that seems like not a bad route to go. And so that's how I decided to do hair and makeup.
Did you just do it on your own, or did you assist someone? Or did you do a school?
So I left high school when I was 15 and went to go and study art, multimedia art for 2 years. And I was very worried that I didn't know how to make money as an artist. But so this is where, like, okay, well, maybe being a makeup artist seems like a reasonable jump. So I went and did a 6-month course in 2000. And I did both. So I remember my first job was like a Ford advert, and I just had to do some grooming for this one actor, make him look natural. And that as an advert, I didn't need to assist. But when I found somebody who I respected, I assisted for 7 years in between doing my own smaller jobs. And I'm so glad I did. I think there's so much learning from a mentor and from multiple people. So when you assist, as I'm sure you know from photography, there's 1 or 2 people that you support regularly, and you kind of have a unspoken language with them. But I also then found my own way through that, and I found working with people that I didn't necessarily gel with or weren't had a very different outlook on life. There was also still a lot of lessons there about how I wouldn't like to be in how I work.
And I imagine that learning from a mentor, you'd learn a lot of the technical things, but also on the whole social dimension of the job as well, right?
Yes, there's technical things. I think the sort of more human skills, I was recently corrected from saying soft skills to human skills, and I think it's just so much more appropriate. So now when I say human skills, I'm referring to what we normally term soft skills. I think that's not necessarily something anybody else can teach you, but what I learned was set etiquette, how to be in that particular working environment and be professional. That's what I found from my very best mentors.
What would be some of the keys of being professional in that environment be like?
Watching and listening and being and preempting what somebody needs. Of course, that takes a little bit of time to, as I mentioned earlier, maybe develop that unspoken language. Not give an opinion unless you asked, especially as you're developing your skills. The HOD or the lead artist has their own way of doing things, and there's a moment to bring your opinion in That was a big lesson. I then decided I wanted to go more into film. And it takes a little bit of time to build up that skill. It's quite different to working in advertising and TV commercials, because you're not just making somebody look the best version of yourself, you're telling a story. And the type of hair and makeup that you do has to enhance the story rather than make somebody see themselves in that person, want to buy something. So I got onto a few more film sets, and I think the sort of like big turning point was I had been asked to come do daily work. Now, dailies, for anybody who doesn't know, is when there's an entire film production and they're staffed up, but when they have big crowd days, they might need extra hands. And so I was called to come assist on a couple of these days, and I saw the HOD standing at the gate when I was leaving, and I just stopped and said, "Do you need a lift somewhere?" Because I knew she was from out of town. And I had no idea at the time actually how touched she was by that, but I just gave her a lift to where she needed to go so she didn't have to wait. And about a year later, out of nowhere, I get this phone call from this woman. And she says, what are you up to at the moment? And I said, nothing. I've just moved into my very first apartment. And I've made this decision to stay present and just be in Cape Town for a whole year, because prior to that, I'd work seasonally and come back and forth from Europe. And she said, well, how would you feel about coming to be my first assistant in the crowd department on Blood Diamond? But it means we have to go away for 4 months. And it was a no-brainer. Like, absolutely, of course. I was 23 at the time. I had never been a first assistant. I'd never had that role, and it's quite a big role. And I went on to the most extraordinary job of my life. It was on that job where I really learned firsthand what humanity and humility is, and really became the underpinning for, I think, a lot of what I do and how I see the world now.
I don't think I knew you had worked on Blood Diamond. It's one of my favorite movies.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that must have been, it was a huge production, huge celebrities. Yeah. Do you want to tell me a bit more about that? I'm curious.
I learned really around how to work efficiently and effectively, and how I learned how to make a lot of prosthetics and blood and all these other skills that I'd learned in college, but not actually had a hands-on experience. I learned how to manage people and lead. There was a huge amount of friction with the fact that I'd got the job as first assistant, because all the other team had been working as film hair and makeup artists for years. And I actually had to win people over and show, like, I'm not here to take your job. There was obviously a reason that Annie, this is the makeup artist who called me in to assist her, felt she needed my support. But the humanity and humility part of it. So we had hundreds of extras a day. Now, on a film set, the crew eat like kings and queens. We are actually treated very well. We work very hard, and it's very long hours, but we are treated very well. And very often the background cast, or then as they were called, extras, have a tent and they're given some bananas and some sandwiches. It's like a totally different meal that they're having to share. And I saw that. I saw the sort of disparity in that. And it's something that I've held on. It's like, how do we just treat everybody the same? In saying that, I recognize there's logistics and all sorts of other things behind that. But that was like what I felt about witnessing that. And the other thing was, many of these people were coming from local villages, and there is, of course, a huge AIDS epidemic in South Africa. So we had to all wear gloves to touch people for hygiene reasons. And I just felt so like how a barrier between skin and touch really changes the dynamic and the relationship of people. And I also remember just how happy and grateful these people from these villages and background caste were to just be there. You know, there I am thinking about, do they have the right food? Am I touching them? I've never seen people just genuinely happy, even if they didn't have very much. And that, something I've held with me a long time. That was the moment that I recognized going, hang on, there's something more to being a responsible human being. I've always had a care for the environment, but not in any, it's not something that was like ingrained into me by my parents, or it was just something I really sensed and felt a discomfort with, that if I didn't address it or acknowledge it, that I was not being what I'm put on this earth to do.
So what happened then?
Well, that's when I made the decision to just be present for a year. I really see this as magic. Like, when I think time frames are very useful for doing scary things. A boundary to go, okay, I've got this amount of time to play with. And so I said to myself, 1 year, you're going to stay put. And I'm not kidding you. That call I mentioned earlier came 3 days later. And there's something in that of making this decision to be present that I find that is when the most opportunities happen. Maybe it's just around making a decision. The same thing happened when I came here to the UK in 2012. I only came for 3 months. That was the plan. And I had that same like little niggle in my belly that said, you've got to stay. You've got to give it a year if you want something to shift. And I was like, okay, if I know I can be here for a year, and if it doesn't work out, I can go back and I'll still have my clients and I can pick up my life. And that was 14 years ago.
When you say being present, what do you mean exactly?
I mean making a very, very intentional decision to be with my whole heart and all my energy in one place.
Was your interest into natural makeup already there, or did it come after?
So at the end of Blood Diamond actually extended shooting, but I had decided I wanted to go on a road trip, and I wanted to go to the States, and I booked a trip to America. And I'd found this mineral makeup and became absolutely fascinated.
What is mineral makeup exactly?
Mineral makeup is made from natural mineral-based pigments. So all powdered makeup has minerals and mica. It's what gives the cosmetic its color and its shine. But mainstream conventional makeup also has a lot of additives and fillers. So mineral makeup, certainly in the early days, was the purest form of these minerals without lots of added fillers and synthetic compressors.
What kind of fillers and synthetics do they add, and what's the reason why they use it?
To make it more cost effective, to give it a certain performance. So for instance, if you have mineral makeups are typically just loose powdered. Sometimes they're pressed, but they're in a loose format. So if you want a liquid foundation, you need to have a cream base or a water base in it that suspends those molecules. But you might want it to have a certain finish, so they add plasticizers. If they want to extend the color, they might add talc to the product because it's a much cheaper filler than if you have to have everything in its pure form.
So mineral makeup is the rich, expensive version of it, but also the more natural one. Is that it?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that it's more expensive. It's just the base ingredient. So the cost of it would be, it's relative. You're not paying hundreds of pounds for a foundation, but it's not turned into a cream or a liquid, and it has traditionally more natural ingredients than ones that have been produced in a laboratory to do the same thing.
Why were you drawn to that?
I think maybe because it was new and interesting and nothing I'd ever seen, and made me think differently about product I was using on myself and on my clients.
What was your journey with the natural makeup, and how did it become the main part of what you were doing for a while?
So when I got back to South Africa after that trip, I actually landed up making my own product and selling it. So I ordered in all the raw pigments from the US and was making little silica powders and foundations, and got really interested in it as just this more natural version, but not like that. That was my whole thing. There wasn't enough formulations and type of product that I needed to do my job at the time. It was just this extra thing that I was curious about. But it wasn't until I got to the UK in 2012, so that was 6 years, I had this like real light bulb moment of going, hang on, I spend so much of my time making sure that my home is cleaned with more natural products and recycling and, all quite basic environmentally responsible habits. But I work in an industry where all my stuff is disposable. I have 15 different colors and 5 different formulations. I don't finish anything. It just felt like, whoa. And then it was like, what about all the packaging? And so I started going down this rabbit hole of what started at looking at the packaging that my products were coming in. And then I learned about organic farming and how ingredients were, natural ingredients were part of many formulations, but generally in normally small amounts. And then started learning about the wider benefits of organic and biodynamic farming. And that was another moment where I made this like really clear decision to go, I want to align what I believe in with how I work. And it took me about 2 years to sort of systematically finish the kit that I had and replace it with something better. And that's also a practice that I do. And whenever I'm shifting something, it's going back to that time frame of finish what you've got and replace with better. And what happened in that process is I suddenly had a lot less to work with. But that's where I discovered my signature style and I became a better artist. And for me, that's where innovation lies. How can we do more with fewer stuff? When you have everything available, when you have every piece of equipment, of course the picture's going to be fantastic. But what can we do with as little as possible and still make it interesting and nuanced and exciting? And that for me is the biggest takeaway from that switch. Is it made me really innovative.
So you switched from working with all those products that had more, let's say, petroleum-based ingredients, non-organic ingredients to a full set of makeup where everything was pretty much made by you from raw materials, or you would buy the natural makeup? How was it?
No, so I wasn't making makeup at that stage anymore. Here in the UK, I had far more access to natural makeup in its truest form. I mean, you can go to the shop now and it will say naturals across it, and it's got like a few natural ingredients, but it's filled with a whole lot of crap. So when it comes to color cosmetics, of course, there will always be some element of a synthesized product. It's not straight out of the ground. I'm not rubbing beetroot on somebody's face, but that beetroot is extracted and stored in a medium that can be applied. So when it comes to skincare, you can get the purest plant-based oils and materials in the product.
Okay. When you say that there's a lot of crap in those products, what do you mean exactly? Why is it crap, and why it's dangerous for people to wear it? Or why did you choose not to buy these products?
So when I say crap, I mean there's a lot of plasticizers, so plastic, microplastics. There's a lot of hormone disrupting ingredients. There's ingredients in there that we can't even pronounce. And so for me as well, there's a lot of health related aspects. Our skin is our largest organ, and we forget that what we put on it has the potential to be absorbed, right? But it's not to say everything like is immediately toxic. Our bodies like accumulate. We're layering multiple different products on our skin every day. Of course, that certain aspects of it will be absorbed into our bodies. So a lot of the natural and organic beauty movement comes from this health aspect. For me, that was a great byproduct of it. I was really interested in the environmental impact of the products I was using, and that is why I changed. But also the social impact, even if we're talking about like organic cotton, right? How those ingredients are grown it's not only about what we're putting on our skin, but what happens to the soil and the animals and the people nearby and the farmers. And so for me, it was an environmental, social way of working that felt more aligned with the stuff that I cared about.
Can you tell me more about the environmental cost of beauty products? What is it doing to the world?
Every year, we have billions of single-use packaging from the beauty industry. I think it's 1.9 billion. I can't remember the exact. It's astronomical. I mean, the number is irrelevant. But think about every time you buy a shampoo bottle, if it comes in a box or if it comes in a tube, we are told it is recyclable because it is technically recyclable, but we are not told, well, if you don't completely empty it out and cut off the top and clean it out and separate the different types of plastic, it's not necessarily going to get recycled. So just because something is technically recyclable doesn't mean that it will be recycled. Glass is another thing. We talk about glass is, of course, infinitely recyclable, but it's also heavier to ship. We're getting products from all over the world. It has a big carbon footprint. Moving those products, whether you're buying it from a store here or shipping it in, we're washing it off ourselves. If your product has plasticizers in it and silicones, and we're washing it off, it's going into the waterways. So there's many different environmental relationships that it's so easy to go, oh, well, I'm just putting on this lipstick, or everything is connected.
If someone is getting some makeup, puts it on first, there might have some microplastic getting into their body and other chemicals that might be nocive getting into their bodies. And also, once they wash it off themselves, it goes into the waterways and pollutes the water and the environment.
Yes. That's a very succinct way of putting it.
When you started moving towards a more natural base of makeup, what was the reception of the industry? How was it welcomed?
So, I mean, I think there's this misconception that you have to be using a certain number of products. I think if I was working with celebrities, it's a different relationship because there's an expectation to have a certain brand because maybe there's an endorsement by it. But I wasn't working with celebrities. I was working with models. So as long as it was clean, hygienic, looked like it was expensive and luxurious, it doesn't matter. Like if I show up using MAC or Chanel, that's my choice as an artist. So I didn't put too much weight into what other people thought about it. I just did my job. What I will say is that I actually used it as a way to market myself differently, because at the time there was lots of chatter around ethical fashion, sustainable brands. It was still ethical. They didn't use the word sustainable so much back then. But I was going, well, hang on a second. You're promoting this beautiful handmade organic garment, but you're putting your model in all this makeup and hair product and hairspray that doesn't align with that. Like, how do we use these two stories to really amplify the message in the most holistic way? So for me, it was a real benefit to align to what was emerging at the time.
You also created an agency where you were representing other makeup artists and people working in the beauty industry with natural products?
Close. I did. I started an agency representing other hair and makeup stylists, art directors, and food stylists who were working with an eco-ethical approach. So there was a small handful of people back then in 2013, sorry. And I couldn't find an agent to represent me based on my values. Obviously, an agent is a business. They're looking to make money. If they say this client wants to book you and it goes all against my morals and principles, I would say no to the job. So I thought, well, I'll just start my own agency. And that was called Novel Beings. And that's how it came about, is a way to represent alignment in the type of brands we wanted to work with and the artists who are already working that way.
How was it for you?
It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think it's quite... I have a tendency, Olivia, to have ideas that are slightly ahead of their time by 5 years, give or take. It's definitely a pattern. But I'm still, my business partner and I still speak about it and just how proud we are of the work. Even all these years later, what we did during that time is incredible and is still a very big part of my portfolio and very much how I got to what I do now. And of course, there was challenges and dealing with people and dealing with egos. And, it's not a walk in the park, but it was a good time. I chose to close it in 2017 because I just didn't want to be... Everybody saw me as the agent and forgot I did hair and makeup. And that was never my goal. I didn't set it up so I could become an agent. I set it up so we could find work that aligned with values.
What happened when you chose to end it up? Did you keep on doing hair and makeup?
I did. I went back to doing hair and makeup. In fact, I never stopped doing hair and makeup. But what was happening is that all the jobs that were coming in, people were seeing me only as the agent. And so I wasn't being considered for roles that I wanted to take on. So there became like a little bit of a, like balancing the ethics and of how you put people's work forward. And it was just taking up too much of my time. It might have been a rash decision. If I had been able to keep going, it would be a very successful agency now, but we ran it from 2013 to 2018, 2019. So it was a successful agency in that sense. But again, something in me, I needed something more. I wasn't fulfilled. And so I'm like, okay, it's done now. Myself and my business partner, Alice Wilby, who was one of the very, very early ethical, sustainable stylists in the London scene, had a very good relationship with Ursula de Castro from Fashion Revolution. And we landed up producing a couple of their campaigns. And we were then had more access to these emerging ethical and sustainable brands. And so we shifted into doing more production and design, rather than being a talent agency. We became a creative agency. And it was through that work that I got really interested, curious, and knowledgeable about the climate crisis and social impact. So that's where I started developing my language and awareness of this concept of sustainability. So it's been this real journey from product of what we put on ourselves to how we use it, to how we can use and produce and design in a way that uplifts and matters and doesn't extract and take away all the time. And so so Novel Beings, which was the talent agency, became a novel approach. And again, 2019, it was just, I don't know, I just didn't want to run a company anymore. I just wanted to be free.
Did you find that freedom?
Yeah, for a time being, I did. I think there's something when you are not responsible. I'm the type of person that when I take something on, I take it on, and I will do all the work if I need to, but then also get really frustrated when people don't step in. So I landed up doing all the stuff, the admin, sorting the taxes, doing just like all the back end stuff, as well as the co-creative stuff. So that was always well matched, but I just got tired of doing admin for everybody else, and I needed to take some time to focus on my own career again. That's fundamentally it. I just needed to focus on me.
Yeah. Before we move completely into the next chapter, I'm wondering if you have some advices for people who want to go more towards a natural way of doing makeup for themselves, or maybe buying products for other people. Do you have any advice now?
What I will say, so less about natural for a second, because it's all sort of lumped into quote unquote sustainable product. You might have seen my facial expression there. But I think it's really important that it's not just about what we're putting on our skin, but finishing what we have. I said it earlier in the interview. It's so critical that we finish what we have before we buy more, irrespective of what it is. People will often come and say, oh, what can I use? Like, what should I buy? And my response is always like, well, what do you use? Because you need to find something to replace it with that gives you that same feeling, that performs the same way you want it to. So it's not just like, here's a bunch of products and brands, go and buy from them. It requires care and attention. I always think like, if you look at your kit or you look at your cosmetic bag, what don't you use? What's been sitting in there for 10, 15, 20 years? Don't just go and buy product for the sake of having it. Really have a curated, we talk about obviously a capsule wardrobe. I think we can do that very much with our personal care and beauty products as well.
I was speaking with a friend of mine recently who's got a platform to sell secondhand fashion with AI, and it was very interesting. One of the things she was saying is that people have what they call green fatigue or sustainability fatigue, that a lot of people don't want to hear about it anymore. Why do you think that is the case? And what's your view on that?
I think sustainability started with great intention, like many great things. It started from a very worthwhile, important place. It started from a very humanist worldview. But sustainability has also become elitist. Sustainable luxury. If something is truly sustainable, it also needs to be equitable, it needs to be affordable, it needs to last. And we as human beings are like beautiful things. So if something is made from natural organic cotton and handmade and wonderful, but if it's not wearable or you don't feel great in it, of course, it just becomes another. It requires resources to make. So I think there's that aspect of where sustainability in this sort of context has come from and where it's gone to. It's also still fundamentally operating in the same capitalist models. And that doesn't solve the problem. That just pushes the problem elsewhere and puts a bit of a green sheen on it and like makes us feel a little bitter about our choices, but it doesn't fundamentally change people's habits or perspectives or so I think there's a lot of that. It's become politicized, and that is problematic with a lot of language when we use this word sustainability as a catch-all, and it's very often misused. So if somebody cares deeply about the planet, right, that's wonderful. You're hopefully going to make more environmental things. But if at the end of the day, another person doesn't know how they're going to put food on their table and keep a roof over their family's head, are they going to care about how something's made when they've got to show up for work looking professional? So I think my perspective on it, whether right or wrong, is that it's become a status symbol, the same way as a well-recognized logo. The same way as Gucci is a status symbol. Sustainable fashion is a status symbol for a different type of person.
Some people would say, what's the problem for it to be a status symbol? If more people want to have that great status, it's going to help the planet.
Well, yes, in theory. The problem is not that it's a status symbol. I mean, status is this concept of status has become about power and money and brands, but status in its truest sense is something that all of us, it's an innate human need to be recognized and seen by people you respect and people who respect you. So as a rule of thumb, status is not the issue. The problem is it is built on these same broken models and systems. So we'll look at I'm not sure if I can mention names, but Vinted, just as a way of example. Fantastic to get people to share and swap clothes and earn a little bit of money. But when you look on there, the amount of mainstream high street stuff that's being sold that's never being worn, it's changing the system, or it's shifting the system of how clothes are swapped and purchased, and it might have some benefits, but then we forget to look at the impact of these disruptive models. And I think that's part of the challenge. We are not necessarily saving the planet if we are still consuming at the same rate.
So you're saying that if we consume from, let's say, Facebook Marketplace, it's still having an impact that we need to consider?
Of course. Of course, because the habit or the behavior of our buying doesn't change. Sure, we're buying something that exists, so that has a slight positive compared to buying something brand new. But do we actually need that thing? I think Facebook Marketplace is an interesting one. You go on there to find something super specific or random, but something like Vinted, you're still scrolling and shopping and your attention is being taken by things. We are still perpetuating buying lots of clothes from high street fashion that maybe can't go back to the store. The number of garments you see on there that with tags that have never been worn from Primark, Temu, Zara, H&M, like that habit, that buying relationship hasn't changed, and we are just consuming it in a different format.
If people want to be more sustainable, it doesn't really help to buy on Vinted, because the actual challenge is the habit and the culture of constant consumption that we have. And as much as buying on Vinted has maybe less of an impact directly, it doesn't change the constant extraction that comes with the culture we're in. Something like that?
It's not just an environmental aspect, right? Sustainability also covers the social impact and the financial conversation, the cost of something. And it's a relationship between these three things. So if something is sustainable luxury and somebody can't afford it, well, that's not sustainable. The dictionary definition is to maintain at a certain rate or level. So I always, for me, how I find it useful to think about this concept, and I know I'm getting a bit meta here when it was a very specific question, but I always think about it like the body. So it's a relationship between dynamic systems. So if sustainability means the economy, the society, and the environment, I think of the economy as our skeleton, right? It gives us form and it gives us structure. And without it being in relationship with our muscular system, we don't have a body, right? There's nothing for the skin to sit on. There's nothing for the organs to sit within. It matters. But a skeleton, not in service of muscle to hold up the skin and is quite literally the symbol of death. Okay. The muscular system I liken to society. It's made up of complex groups. I always I always use the analogy of like bodybuilding, right? If you suddenly pumping yourself full of steroids, like sure, you look really big and strong physically, externally, but you've grown that muscle way too quickly for your bones to support it. So what you're actually doing is decalcifying and weakening your skeletal system. The same way as if society grows too rapidly, and there's not the infrastructure to support it, we have collapse, we have problems. And then finally, the environmental ring, I liken to our skin and our organs, because just like the environment, it's designed to protect us. We are covered in all kinds of diverse bacteria on our skin, and bacteria is not inherently a bad thing. Our organs have also natural sinks and processes. It allows us to breathe, take in oxygen, excrete it without being problematic. So I think if we think about these components that are often discussed under the catch-all banner of sustainability, somebody might say sustainability and mean environmental impact. Somebody else might say sustainability and talk about their financial bottom line. Somebody else might say sustainability and talk about society continuing. And so for me, this way to think about it as the body and the relationships of systems to keep us whole and healthy is really important to start using this word accurately so that there is enough for everyone forever. And going back to that body piece, right? If we think around when we are healthy versus when we're unhealthy, we can still keep going when we overweight, when we're unhealthy, when we're smoking, drinking, we can sustain that. Why don't we get the system healthy and sustain it at that level?
You've also been working on this project called I Am Impact. We also have done some of it together, and I would love you to explain a little bit for the people who are listening to us, what is the I Am Impact project?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I Am Impact is essentially, I am painting conversations onto bodies, so naked bodies on my canvases, as a way to explore and question our relationship with Earth's planetary boundaries. I'm not sure if you've heard of the 9 planetary boundaries. It's a scientific framework that looks at Earth system thresholds. So climate change is one of them, ocean acidification. What we worked on together was around nitrogen and phosphorus cycles. And for your listeners, it's still one of my favorite shoots, and the image is something that it stops people all the time. But I needed a way to express and learn about these environmental boundaries and put it into human form. I think going back to the conversation earlier, when everybody's overwhelmed with all this language and it feels insurmountable around how we're going to continue on this planet. And language can be so polarizing or problematic that when you are looking at an image with no words, that is arresting. So whether you like it or not, it still makes you want to ask a question. That's what the project does. It invites us to ask, I am impact. Oh, what is my impact? But also, what will the impact be on me if these tipping points come to bear? So there's another framework called the Human Givens, which is a psychological framework, which also happens to have 9 frames. And I mentioned already around status. That is one of our innate human needs. So is attention. I love this expression. It says attention is a form of nutrition. When these innate needs are out of balance, that's when we experience depression, mental unwellness, anxiety. So I've mentioned attention, but we are in an attention economy. Everything is stealing our attention. But in its simplest form, we all need to be seen and acknowledged. So where I Am Impact is going now, since we worked on it together, is actually looking at the relationship between these Earth systems and these emotional needs. So what happens to our sense of safety when our climate changes so dramatically? What happens? What's the relationship between our need for power and brands and consumption, so status, and the impact on biodiversity? And so that's how it's evolved, but it's also what's become the baseline of all the work that I'm doing now around reconnection and being and thinking as nature, with nature, in a different way. So it's not I don't want to demonize people. I think I hear it a lot going, well, if we were all gone, everything would be fine. And I just fundamentally don't believe that. If we see ourselves as in relationship with nature as part of it, then we matter. So I think it's super important to keep a human lens on something that can feel all about the environment, but we don't see ourselves in it.
I've heard you say that we want to consume less in order to sustain life on Earth. How can we do business in a way that cares for the planet in today's society, in a way that's durable for a company?
It's a tough challenge. And again, Olivia, it goes back to, we are still running in a capitalist extractive society. So business wanting to be sustainable, they can sustain if they keep selling at the rate that they are doing. For us to really continue life on this planet beyond the next 50 years, a lot less before massive environmental changes are going to become very prevalent. I mean, they already are, but it's going to increase. Is we have to fundamentally rethink how we do and run business. So it is a huge tension, and it's a huge challenge. And a business can absolutely be more environmentally responsible and treat their people well. And that should be the baseline. But it's really naive and simple to say that you can keep selling with exponential growth and be sustainable. It's impossible.
In your work now, after doing the makeup agency, then you went into doing production, and where are you at now?
So 2019, I had another one of those, it didn't matter how green and natural my kit was. It was late November 2019, just before COVID. And I remember standing on a beach in Hastings, just looking out at the sea and going, it's time for me to stop doing hair and makeup. It didn't matter how eco, there was just too much waste, and I was upholding systems I disagreed with. I don't think, the thing with beauty and fashion is irrespective of how it's made and where it comes from, how it's sold. We are still selling on the premise of, to be more successful, to be more beautiful, you need this stuff. And that, for me personally, felt a misalignment. So that is no judgment on if that's how people make their living or it's what they care about. I fully support it. But for me, that no longer felt something I wanted to be part of. And I was fortunate enough that I didn't have a big mortgage. I don't have kids. I am in the position where I can take these big drastic steps. And it's not easy, but I don't have the dependencies of other people to sort of worry about when I have this super values aligned work. But what I did was I decided to go and retrain in sustainable business management, because I wanted to go into companies and just feel like I was having an impact. So I retrained over the course of a year, and in a master's equivalent diploma, and I started consulting to companies on ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, traditional sustainability language, materiality, which I now call sustainability as usual, for all the reasons we've just discussed. So I went into consulting, and it was really hard for me because I didn't come from a corporate background, as you know, having listened to the story so far. But I also think that's my secret sauce.
Yeah, I was wondering how it was for you to have gone back to studying after a full-on career.
Well, I'm an insatiable learner. I've always continued studying. Having not finished high school and having not gone to university, I've always had to self-motivate myself to learn. And yeah, so if I'm interested and curious in something, I love it. I liked having a little bit of structure as well, and a little bit of normalcy.
So where are you at now?
Oh, good question. So now we've kind of gone full circle. I got to the point with consulting where I really noticed that what teams were struggling with. So I was working predominantly with small to medium businesses, or SMEs as they called. And when you've gone and studied and you've got all this knowledge about things, of course, it's easy to understand what's going on in the world. But when your job is to, and your responsibility in your job is to go and perform this function so the business continues, of course, it's really difficult for people to even be aware of what's outside of their purview. And I was working as an associate for a really, really lovely little consultancy up in the Midlands. And we would go into these businesses. So I never had to find my own work, by the way. Like that's something I'm terrible at. I would always go in as a specialist to other companies to deliver this work. And we'd be doing these strategy development days. And there was so little imagination about what solutions could be. It would be, oh, we've got to reach net zero. That was the buzzword. That was the motivation. It became a compliance thing. Their clients were saying they needed to do this thing. So that was the gateway drug, if you will. Oh, well, we can recycle more. Oh, we can use less paper. Oh, and there was just, people really struggled to think beyond the obvious. And so I started developing games as a way to go into these workshop environments, these strategy environments, where it had enough information on each of the cards to spark imagination, because I always believe that, like, I can go into most industries. I don't need to be an expert in that industry because all the knowledge is in the room. The experts are in the room. All I bring in is a different perspective and a reminder of, have you thought about this? So I kind of, going back to this body analogy, right? I kind of feel like a bit of a personal trainer for organizations, where I can't do the work. I can't build the muscle, but I can adjust the position to make it easier or to improve. And that's kind of how I see myself now. So through these games, I facilitate unlocking of imagination through shared, playful, and reflective sense making. So that's one of the things I do, Olivier, because it doesn't stop there, I'm afraid. So these games are under a banner called REGENASYST, which is a made-up word, so nobody can find it unless I spell it out. But you're really wanting to make something with my hands and retain a bit of an art practice. How I've come to describe myself today is as an ecological facilitator, systems designer, and artist. And I have this little virtual laboratory called Candid Studios, which is a mashup of my name and how I approach the world. And I'm really interested in finding out about or helping people reconnect with themselves, each other, and the natural world, whether that's as individuals, whether that's in organizations. So I'm not just consulting to businesses. It really is a space to play and experiment. And it's the most aligned I've ever felt, but it's not without its challenges.
So you're saying there's two things here. There's the work side of things where you go into companies and with games help people reimagine and reshape how they're working so that it's more caring for life on Earth.
All forms of life. Life with a capital L, as I like to say.
Parallelly, you are facilitating experiences.
So for me, I see the games as part of this piece of work. It just happens to be the tool that I do it with. It could be any other form of creative practice. I've mentioned to you before, I have a practice called Mud, Mind, and Material, where we make Dorodango balls as a workshop to explore waste material and circularity and reconnection with self. I could, although I host that for individuals, I could just as easily take that into a business environment to help people reconnect with themselves, each other, and the natural world.
I'm very curious about this game thing you're talking about.
It's more gamified workshops. And gamification, I don't know if you know much about gamification. Well, there's different techniques to motivate people. So if you think of Dungeons and Dragons, right? People are having to navigate and problem solve and role play to get through. Now, there's a lot of these mechanics that you can bring into facilitation spaces. And I use cards. So there will be a little story on it or an instruction or a prompt that you will go through certain phases of a workshop and do certain activities to get to an outcome. So they're not games as in virtual reality games or computer games. It's where we all come together and have some fun, stand up, and have to complete a task. Sometimes I bring in a timer, so you have to do it in a very short amount of time. Or sometimes you have to go on a quest and go outside and find something and bring it back. And so it's using these different techniques in a business or professional or organizational setting to help unlock people's imagination because it gets them out of their comfort zone.
What's the reception to these activities when you go in those companies?
Really good, actually. Really good and insightful. And there's sometimes a little bit of resistance, of course, because it's a new way to do something that's quite traditional. But there's never been a time where somebody hasn't gone, maybe thought about it differently or pushed back or responded in a different way. And that for me is all that matters, is that we just think a little bit bigger. So I have 7 or 8 games now, and they all kind of do different things. So it's a bit confusing to talk about in this quite short space of time. But I can take these principles into different types of businesses with different types of people, and there's always something interesting that emerges.
So if I have my company and some employees, what I want to do is I want to get you in here to change the way that my team deals with consumption products, the structure, play with your games, and then there's going to be a change in my company.
It's not as simple as that. And that's been one of my challenges, because people go, well, which game must I pick? And that's the wrong question. It's the question is actually, what is the obstacle? So one of the games is called Shift Happens, and it's a modular process. So you can run multiple workshops, and the final outcome is a regenerative business strategy, co-designed by your whole team with all the voices of your whole company as part of it. So you get to something very practical. But the first parts are a space to dream and to share and to actually find out what the future is that we want to live in. And then together you plan how you're going to get there. So to your earlier question, is that how do we be a more sustainable company? I think that's the wrong question. It's how do we fundamentally look at, are we doing what we need to do to help usher in the world that we want to see? And sure, that can, on its basic things, that can be about reducing carbon emissions. It can be about being environmentally responsible. But I think where we're at now, that should be the baseline. If that's what we are still talking about, we're not moving the needle. So I want to make it very clear, I'm not in any way saying that what people have understood sustainability to be as in business, I'm not dismissing that. It's a fundamental part of it, but it shouldn't be where we stop. We need to rethink and reimagine ways that we can get there. And that might mean dropping a product line or two. It might mean changing what you offer. So it's scary because it's going into places that things have worked for some time, or that's the way it's always been done. It's a terrifying space to be in. But I fundamentally don't believe we're going to get there if we keep with that same way of thinking.
It seems like after COVID, there was this surge into awareness around the planet, and for some of us, a new hope coming up. And then now we're in a very different place culturally, it seems, when I'm talking to people, that there is a complete looking the other way, because I'm guessing people have been feeling overwhelmed. Where do you see it all going?
Everything's become so polarized. We are in the midst of systems breaking down. Like, that is the reality. We are in a state of breakdown and collapse in multiple aspects of that. This polarization is one of them. Of course, the ecological breakdown, social breakdown, cost of living. All these things are very alive right now, and that is scary and overwhelming because we're still trying to live in this old system. If I look to nature, you asked me earlier about what is ecological leadership. It is really around learning from an ecological worldview and how nature works to start dealing with and grappling and applying ideas that don't become problems. Like, nature has been successfully evolving for 4.2 billion years. Like, there's some really incredible knowledge in there. So how do we take that by actually stopping and looking and watching and sensing and not rushing off at 1,000,000 miles an hour to make decisions that are going to solve a very small thing in the short term? And I recognize it's a very scary time, but I think that if we slow down, take a breath, and watch, that there are solutions out there. I'm still hopeful, but I'm not under the illusion that everything's going to be easy and perfect as these new systems emerge.
Do you feel scared at times?
Sure. It is scary. It's scary because, as a freelancer, I'm still a freelancer. Like, that hasn't changed my whole career. It's harder to find work. There's for all the convergent problems going on in the world, whether it's the war in Iran, the Straits of Hormuz being blocked, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Like, there's so many things that are causing this. The still picking up off the back of COVID, this polarity of not wanting to do DEI, sustainability, all this stuff. So I think for me, the scariest time is right now, because it's been the longest period of time where I haven't been able to find a financial footing. And also, we just don't know the ramifications of what is going to happen with tipping points. So these Earth system tipping points, because we always talk about 2050, 2030, about when we've got to reach net zero. But in reality, there's 4 years We've got not even 4 years, 3.5 years before we are at the very precipice of fundamental change, and that is terrifying. And people don't want to be terrified when there's so much chaos going on already. And so we bury our heads, and I'm scared of people being too afraid to look up.
So do you think that if nothing changes in the next 5 years, we're fucked?
I think if nothing changes now, that a semblance of the memories of our childhood are going to be no more. They're not what the next generation is going to inherit. I mean, of course, that's the case anyway, but I think it's going to be even further apart.
If that happens, how do we deal with that?
One foot at a time, with care and compassion. It's going to be a shit show. I hope I can swear, but that's we can cut it out if not. We have a very scary time coming up ahead, and I think I always go back to like seeing mutual aid groups emerge during COVID. I think fundamentally people are good, and I think fundamentally people care about each other and people care about nature. And it's in these times of chaos and crisis that you really see people coming together to care for each other. I also think we've got to look far more locally. We've become so globalized. But if your street floods, right, do you know your neighbor? Do you know how to care for each other? That for me is where we need to put a lot of energy, is really local and community focused work.
Yeah, so you'd say that one of the key points to all of this is to recreate stronger bonds with the people that are physically close to you?
Yeah, we see a rise of nationalism, but why can't we have a rise in civic pride and pride in our communities? I think that's vital, because that's when people start seeing each other again, when they collaborate and they see things change, and you suddenly go, oh, I'm noticing a lot less litter. I'll think twice before I just drop something. Yeah, there's something, we've got to get small and connected again. And also not assume that what's happening in this street is happening 3 streets over. Because nature sort of teaches us around place and context around where you are. The weather might be different in the next borough, changes. So really hyper-local is where I'm very curious at seeing solutions.
If you were to give advices to your 15-year-old self, what would it be with what you know now?
Don't laugh at doomsday preppers. There might be something in it. Do you know doomsday preppers, Olivia?
Are they the people that are saying that the end of the times are coming very soon?
Yeah, they've been preparing for the end of times. And I think it's been so flippant. They've become a little bit of a joke. But I think there's something in preparing for all kinds of disasters. So I would say to my 15-year-old self, prepare for the unknown and hope that the worst never comes. What else would I say to my 15-year-old self? Be kind to yourself. Don't be afraid of your own light. I'm terrified of my own light, but I would definitely say to her, don't be.
Why do you think you're terrified of your own light?
Not wanting to take up too much space. I think there's, yeah. I guess it's around we all and I have so much potential. And I think that potential is scary. For me, it is anyway. And so there's maybe a little bit of a dampening down or a smalling. So making a smalling, that's not a word. Making myself smaller rather than just being really brave and radical.
Is the fear that you would experience exclusion?
I don't know. I've always been someone on the outskirts. I've never been I've always been the new kid at school, or have a completely different mindset or worldview to most of the environments in which I go. And so I'm not so worried about exclusion in that sense. But what if I'm brilliant, Olivia? And how do you deal with that? There's a very beautiful quote on this topic by Marianne Williamson. And I don't know enough about her. I'm just reading a quote. I know some people sort of find her a bit in the controversial realm. So park opinion on that. But she says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that it's most It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Well, actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world, and there's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I learned that earlier this year, and it's just been a really good reminder of how important it is to show up with our whole selves. And I think for a long time, I've been afraid of my whole self. Not for anybody else, but for me.
One thing that I've noticed is that friends of mine that grew up without a dad had often a harder time bringing their voice outside in the world. And it's just what I've seen in my friends. But I was wondering, you said that you grew up with a single mom. Do you think that that has to do with that potentially?
I mean, it's an interesting thought. My dad was around. It's not like I had no relationship with my dad. But it's actually my mum who made me believe I could do anything. And I guess that has, if I listen back to the story, that has carried through. I've definitely not been afraid to try something new. But I'm not comfortable being on camera or talking about something on social media or just putting it out into the world. I think that's what I'm trying to get at with The Shining. Like, I will do something purely because it makes me happy or excited or energized. But then I don't put it out into the world because it might be too big. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense to me. I can tell you what I understand. That there is a genuine joy and ease for you to create things, bring things to life, but that using technology and putting yourself out there with the means of today, there's a resistance in you to do that.
Yes, I think you summarized that beautifully.
And with hearing you saying that, I'm imagining there's something in you that wish you could do it more.
Yes. I wish I could do it more because I know from feedback that the ideas and the workshops and the games and the things that I'm bringing into this world, when I have shared it like a little mouse with people, there's so much enthusiasm and excitement in them. And so there is so much potential in it. But I don't, that's where I stop. It's like, well, I built it now, find it. And I think that's part of my challenge is how do I make something beautiful really great and reach as many people as possible to do the work that I believe I've been put on this planet to do, which is to help people reconnect with themselves, each other, and the natural world. Like, I know that is what I'm very good at, but I kind of get stuck at shouting about it.
Yeah, sounds like there is this longing for celebration of what you've been doing and creating. You can see that there's so much power to contribute with the tools that you've created. And now what's there is how do you bring that into the world, and how do you authentically and aligned bring that to the rest of the world without betraying yourself.
Yeah.
Would you say that the workshops that you're holding now around creativity, Griffin Color and clay workshop, is this another way to somehow practicing this, bringing yourself in front of people, allowing yourself to take space?
It's definitely a practice and it's helping my facilitation. But what I'm doing in both of those workshops, upon reflection to your lovely question, is I'm actually holding space. I'm not taking space. I'm making space for others to grieve. I'm always part of it. Like, I make sure I'm always, I'm not removed from anything I do. I'll always participate in the workshops or play the games. And if I go back to my story, marketing my own games is not my strength. And I'm just tired of having to do the things that are really hard. And part of that is putting myself on camera. I'm fine in this environment. I'm fine standing up and talking to people. But putting myself out into the world is terrifying.
Yeah, what comes to me is gratitude that you've accepted to put yourself in front of the camera with me here. I had you in mind since the beginning when I started to do the podcast. So, yeah, such a joy to get to know you better and to be inspired with what you share. and also to see your hair up and your earrings. A lot of the time when we hang out, it's maybe in a park or something like that, and it's also enjoyable for me to see you a little bit prepared for this.
Thank you. I made an effort. I had a very lovely call with a friend of mine in India recently, and they gifted me this telepathic manifestation healing session. There was two things that I took away from that conversation. One around movement, and I can't remember the detail, but take care in your appearance. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So I'm glad that you noticed, and that it has been nice to see.
It's been nice to see. It's been nice to hear. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad. And and I hope to see you very, very soon.
I look forward to it. Much love to you, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.